This is Willpower.
My pancakes, my people, my pancakes, my people. I am sitting down with Brian Murphy on the show today, Willpower Podcast. And there's so many passion points we cover. We talk a lot about nutrition and superfoods and adaptogenics and all the ways that we can feed ourselves healthfully and all the ways that the United States and beyond are underserving us by putting molecular crap into the ingredient profile of so many foods. If you listened to the Dr. Casey Means episode on blood sugar and nutrition a year and a half ago, a long time ago now, a couple years ago, you'll begin to see the passion points rising for this. And if you get Casey Means' new book, Good Energy, you'll see how even more now things are ending up in our food system, in our packaged goods, and in the things that we eat that are making us so sick. So when I discovered my pancakes, my people, Ryan Seaman and Brian Murphy, who's on the podcast today with me, I was thrilled because they take such a meticulous eye to ingredient profile, to sourcing, and they wanted to create something that was born out of the hot desert of Burning Man, actually. Ryan is a burner like me, and he found himself in need of a good combination of superfoods and adaptogens while he's out in the heat and getting something that was healthy on the go. So he developed this recipe, this mix, and many years later, he is partnered with Brian, who has a background in finance. They met at a meditation retreat, and they launched this Living Prana brand. So it is grain-free, egg-free, plant-based, organic, incredible ingredients. You can make pancakes, you can make waffles, you can # break up with bread and make your own wraps. And I just love, love, love their products. So I said to Brian, let's get on the show. Let's talk about what all the feels around nutrition in the world today and all the ways we can support people by bringing consciousness and awareness to this well-cultivated, sustainably sourced, premium quality functional food with Living Prana. So we're going to just lean in. We have so much fun. Brian came to see me and sit with me in person at one of my Sherpa Breath and Cold mentorship retreats. And we had a little barbecue dinner in Austin, Texas. And then we threw down this podcast. And I think it's a really friendly and open, approachable conversation to listen in, to talk about nutrition, how you can better your food and better your spirit through the things that you eat, and getting a good understanding about why we need to be reading labels and checking ingredients and really feeling into the way our body is most nourished. Let's get to it with Brian Murphy. Welcome to the Willpower Podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Weitzel. Together, we explore health optimization tools that propel you from comfort to courage, illuminating the path together to a remarkable life through breath, cold, and biohacking. Brian Murphy, welcome to the Willpower Podcast.
It is a pleasure to be here.
The official start.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, it's not the official start to our friendship, though. That's what I'm super excited about. We've got a lot of time under our belts so far.
We have a couple of notches.
It's good. Mm-hmm. And my pancakes, my people. You let me build my own tagline. So we'll talk a bit about all of the beautiful things that you've birthed into the world, but I want the listeners to get a chance to know you. And you just dropped the bomb on me saying, I lost 65 pounds. So I want to hear a little bit about the origin story of you before we dive into all the fuel you're bringing into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was not always the human that I am today. Growing up most of my life, I had a very unhealthy relationship with food. I didn't really have healthy habits in the house growing up. And really, food was a stress outlet for me. I used it in like a very unhealthy way, sugar, sweets, whatever it was, but like that was my coping mechanism. And so, I was like chubby as a kid, and then I hit puberty, and then I grew out of it. And then you fast forward post-college, and I was an investment banker for years coming out of college, and I did some consulting work. But it was really 2016 was this big defining moment for me where I was working for a private equity-backed startup in healthcare, absolutely crushing it. But my CEO was like an absolute jerk and tried to make my life like miserable. I was also engaged, and I was in a relationship that I was walking forward for everybody but myself. And so through a lot of these pressures, both like professionally and personally in my relationship, I ceded my power and put all of my needs on the back seat. And that stress was really debilitating. So I had this lapse back into using food as an outlet. And I also abandoned all of my health practices. And so I stopped working out. I wasn't lifting. And I just really was a shell of myself because I just was feeling so much pressure in my life. And so you fast forward and we get engaged. This was the beginning of or end of 2015, coming into 2016. And I was very unhappy, like borderline depressed. I would get up in the morning, look in the mirror, and be incredibly just upset and wouldn't even want to leave the house. And so ironically, it was the engagement that sort of kicked this into motion. I'm like, I've got to get into shape for this wedding that ultimately never happened.
And did you feel like the impetus for getting engaged? I just want to ask this question. Like, were you feeling like there was pressure to do it, familial or from your partner? Or did you feel like it's time and I need to do this? Because I think it's hard to make those moves when you're feeling a little like, you know, low in the mouth, you know?
Yeah, it was all three. So it was her family. It was her, which were probably related. Very traditional Midwestern family. Her older sister got married right out of college, and by the time she was 32, had 2 kids. And so the family was giving my former fiance a lot of pressure. And then I was 32 at the time, and they started to look at me like, what's wrong with you? And that you're 32 and that you're not thinking about being a father and like being a family man. And so it was coming from that side. And then for me, that got into my head, and I developed a story about, am I just afraid of commitment? And what is it that's preventing me from really taking this next step that society tells us is the natural progression in life? And so there was something about being in the early age of 30s, right out on the other side of my Saturn return, where this came up. And yeah, it was absolutely crippling. And I wasn't resourced to really deal with that stress. So I went inward, and then food was my outlet. I ballooned up to 227 pounds at my worst. And
was it a late night eating thing? Was it like secretive, or you just
no? It was just blatant. Wheels were off the track. Yeah. It was just like I was constantly imbalanced, feeling stressed at all times, on high alert, and this was my way that I brought some grounding into my life. And I realized that was very unhealthy to do. And so
I think it's something we can all relate to. There's definitely times that I'm like medicating with food, or, you know, I come from you don't know, but my parents both had issues with food and using, you know, it as a comfort in their life when things came up. I think that this is a very prevalent thing that happens to us all.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very common. And as I have shared this story for the first couple of years, I didn't really share the story with anybody. People who knew me at the time saw my transformation.
Right.
But then people that I would meet years later, I just sort of kept it to the vest. And I realized a couple of years later that this is actually something that's very relevant and was very impactful when I started sharing my story. So this engagement is going on. We're on a short, quick engagement. I hired a trainer. I'm like, okay, this is going to help me change something. And I started talking to him and telling him about my day and what I do. And pretty quickly got into the conversation of, I'm really treating my body like garbage. And he's like, you can work out with me all you want. And I'm like, you're right. Like I need to really clean up what I'm putting in my body. And so almost cold turkey, I cut out all dairy. I cut out all heavily processed sugars and all refined carbs. And that like the weight shed off me. It stripped like the first 35 pounds of it in the span of 6 weeks, maybe 6-8 weeks.
Was it like a new lease on life vibe, or like, because there's a thing about that shift in eating and cold turkey, as you said, like, did it feel like I've got this no problem, or could you feel your stress rising again? Could you feel that you were like navigating it, or did it help to have a trainer and maybe some other people that were like, hey, I care about you, I'm supporting you?
I was still in the darkness of my engagement. And so I was going through the transformation and I was seeing the results, and I was starting to gain confidence back. And I was starting to, like, that feeling of waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror and feeling depressed was dissipating and it wasn't happening every morning. So that was great. And I still had I had, one shoe would drop, but the other was still there. And so, the food was the big first step. And then I started to plateau. And then my trainer who I worked out with started putting me through some very intense cardio regimens and was working out on the beach 3 days a week and in the gym 2 days a week. And that I attribute to the other 30 or so pounds that I lost. Ultimately, it was over the span of about 6 months, and it was about 65 pounds.
Yeah, wow.
And that I do think it was a big contributor that helped to gain the strength to call off the wedding. And we were set to get married at the end of February, and I called off the wedding about 30 days before it happened. And so when I had done that, the combination of it all and that is when it felt like a new lease on life.
Yeah.
I was like, I was able to face a lot of fears. I was able to take some newfound responsibility and love for myself. And the changes with respect to my health, those stuck like immediately and consistently. Like it wasn't a yo-yo thing. It wasn't a fad thing. Like those were permanent, sustainable shifts. And I felt so much healthier over it. So I was really fueled by feeling my energy come back, by feeling my confidence come back, seeing my strength come back.
Yeah.
And that was really motivating for me.
Yeah. And also a really challenging thing to do. I think, sometimes we are on the side of the breakup where we're like, I need to move on from this. And it's not an easy choice, but it has to happen. And you hope that it's like for the good of both parties, but you have to do what you have to do. So it's like making a big shift. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about people doing, breathwork journeys or ice baths or, there's moments in our lives that we have an opportunity. And I think a lot with food, it's very true, just working through nutrition with people where we build a little confidence back. And we can start to say, hey, how do I like my eggs? And what do I want in my life? And, what's bringing me joy and pleasure and what mostly like a lot of what won't I stand for? A little bit of like, sometimes you have to leave the table when respect is no longer being served. I'm thinking of a lot of people I've had an opportunity to work with and been so blessed to work with over the years, and that some of these things, like you're working out, losing some weight, feeling better, clearing up some of the depression, they really can make such a solid shift in your ability to use your words and ask for what you need, which doesn't always end well.
Absolutely.
And also, but it is speaking our truth. That's so important.
Yeah, and feeling clear and confident in your voice. I mean, that was a lot of what I was experiencing after the shift was when my confidence came back, I would stand for myself. And I knew that I had my own back and I knew whatever it was, like, I've got this.
Yeah.
And after going a transformation like that, and that then showed up in ways of like, I was able to stand in the fire and tell a woman that, hey, this life is not going to be for me.
Yeah.
And I see where this path is going and explain the same thing to her family who absolutely torched me.
Yeah.
In this, actually, the response was just get married and figure it out later.
Wow.
But able to hold and knowing that I was hurting her in the time, but also knowing that it was going to be best for both of us.
In the long run.
And we're not connected, but I know from afar, I know she's living the life that she wanted.
Yeah.
Which is a life that I wasn't wired to or prepared to or wanting to give to her as well or share together.
Yeah.
So it definitely was the right thing. And it was very difficult to find my way there. And I don't know if I would have found my way there had I not gone through my weight transformation and gained my confidence and my strength back and really started standing up for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And that's so going through the fire for sure. And also, if we don't have that, then none of it works.
That's right.
That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let's turn the light on this food as fuel, how everything sort of catalyzed together and where we are today with Living Prana and your partner and all the things that are developing. And I continue to watch developing as I get to know you and I eat all the tasty treats that you make.
Thank you. So Ryan Seaman and I, we started Living Prana about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago. We met at an ayahuasca retreat in Hawaii. And it was my first time in any type of psychedelic retreat or any container that was held in a way that was very deliberate and mindful. He had got in there. He had actually created the recipe about 4 years prior. And it had been a friends and family thing. And he served it in different venues and areas and constantly got the question of like, these things are so great. And I feel so clean. I feel so strong after these. Like, when are you going to bring them to the world? And, there were skill sets and partnership that were missing in allowing that to happen. And Ryan and I met at this retreat, and he shared this recipe with me, and immediately I got the hit. This is more than just a pancake. This is about changing people's relationship with food. And that, for me, brought me back to my experience in 2016, because like now I eat these waffles and pancakes 4 or 5 days a week, and I have what is a healthy indulgence. That's really what we've created, is that you can have your cake and eat it too. So what we did was we took the pancake experience, we cleaned out all the poison, all the artificial sweeteners, artificial ingredients. We anchored it with buckwheat, which is a nutritional rock star. And then we add a bunch of mushrooms and adaptogens and herbs into it to support different functions. So we have brain cakes, which support memory and focus and reduce stress. And then prana cakes that are more for the body, natural energy, vitality, and mood balancing. And so different curated combinations of the mushrooms and adaptogens and real doses of them, anywhere between 50 and 90% of the recommended daily intake of any of the mushrooms or the herbs. Yeah. So things that actually work. And there's a lot of products in the market today that just... they're like fairy dusting with mushrooms, right? That's what I was going to say. It's like a sprinkle, and they get it on the label, and then they talk about the benefits, but the consumer's not educated enough to know, this is not a real dose for me to actually feel the benefits that you're advertising. And as a food brand owner, we also are in a precarious position where we need to be careful about claims that we make on our packaging. And so we are very mindful about how we word it and what we show, but there are studies with most of these ingredients that demonstrate the benefits, like lion's mane for focus and cognition, cordyceps for energy, maca for mood balancing and natural energy. So we lean on the science that's there. Yeah. Some of the herbs are less studied than others, but we use that as really a backdrop to stand behind, what we bring into the world. But at the end of the day, it's almost like, as a kid, I think about parents who would put the pill in the applesauce, which so many people had, right? And so many parents are loving what we've created for this reason. Kids love what we have, and they're like, it's a pancake. Yeah. Brain cakes, chocolate cinnamon pancake. Kids go nuts over them. So real. And parents too. When we were at Dave Asprey's Biohacking conference, we served 2,000 this year. We served 2,000 plates over 3 days. And we had so many parents coming to us and saying, thank you. Like, thank you. I need to bring this into my home and my kids, and just thank you for what you're doing for our family. And because kids still see it as sort of the treat or the morning breakfast piece or the pancake or the waffle. It still feels like, like homemade and with mom. And, it feels like that whole vibe to them. And then it's not like putting broccoli on the plate and being like, good luck. Absolutely. And it wasn't always like this. So Ryan created the original recipes. The first Prana Cakes was made at Burning Man, now almost 7 years ago. And it was like the anthem of energy and recovery and what would carry you through your day in a place that would really feel full of life force, of prana. Yeah. And that was why they ultimately were called Prana Cakes. Yeah. Or are called Prana Cakes. And so when we connected, and after this retreat, he called me a few weeks later and said, I think it's time. The world needs this. And you feel like the complement that it's been missing in order to really make this happen. So I flew. So you dabbled a little in the conversation at the ceremony a bit, or he could have knew your background and was like, damn, this guy has the strengths to my weaknesses, and maybe vice versa. Yeah, I was so captivated when he shared about this concept of the prana cakes and brain cakes at ceremony, but I didn't say anything. One thing that I heard, it was my first time, there in that container, and people had said, you shouldn't make any life-changing decisions. True. Yeah, true. In that auspice. But I guess starting a business doesn't fit on that list of life-changing decisions. But I knew in my mind, I'm like, wow, like this is going to really make a big impact on the world. Yeah. And it took a couple of weeks. Ryan was actually with another friend of mine, Sanjay, and he's like, if you're serious about bringing these to the world, you need to call Brian. And Ryan called me, and within the span of 2 weeks, I was in his kitchen in LA. And we were recipe testing, product development, and of the original version of the recipe. And after 5 days of eating pancakes, I was so sick, and I was bloated, and I was slow and lethargic. And Ryan and I said to each other, like, we won't bring a product into the world that people can't enjoy cleanly every day. Yeah. And that started a big research deep dive for us of what is it? It was already gluten-free. Right. So it wasn't gluten. And what we realized was it was actually grains, and the grains were causing a lot of inflammation and a lot of discomfort. And so we then started and tested with probably 12 or 15 different gluten-free, healthy flour alternatives. And when we landed on buckwheat, it was all systems go.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Calling all coaches, all therapists, all doctors, all people in the world of healing that want to expand their coaching capacity and their toolkit. I noticed as I was working through the health optimization landscape, two modalities that worked more effectively and efficiently than any other when they were combined, and that is breathwork and cold exposure. And sure, you've heard a lot of these guests on the podcast speaking about these tools, and I post all over social media how much I love and revere them to be able to celebrate ourselves. And what I want to encourage you, if you're working with other people, is to expand your coaching, your guiding, your facilitation kit with these two tools. And because I noticed this gap in the marketplace where there was methods and styles and specific directive energy in the breath and cold space, but there was no one who was really saying, hey, let's talk about all of it. And let's talk about the most important thing, which is context, right? And if context is king, then safety is queen. And we need to make sure we're taking care of people in the process of breathing themselves into being and really feeling into our greatest capacity in the cold, which is this amazing experience that I want you to undertake more and more, and then be able to guide people safely, effectively, with a dash of fun through breathwork and cold exposure. So sherpabreathandcold.com, there is an instructor training there. So sherpabreathandcold.com/instructor certification. You can come along, work with me and my master team, spend 2 days with us together, really applying these tools and just knocking it out of the park as you begin to layer the work in with people that you care about, people in your community, and perhaps clients that you may be working with and facilitating, so that they can all work through and learn how to heal themselves faster, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're facilitators. And I want to work with you. So come and check it out. Learn all about breath work and all about cold exposure, both science and benefits, and the ways that you can apply these to the people in your life. I'm so stoked about these practices. And it's really from my heart that I speak to you to say, join the merry band, will you? Sherpa Breath and Cold. Come be an instructor.
To just back out a little, because we're talking about mushrooms, which not necessarily the magic ones, and we're talking about adaptogens. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit and sort of crack the door on ingredients and adaptogens, and what, specifically for anyone who's listening, what an adaptogen is. So many different types in the world, and really like if and how there's a heavy focus on the mushroom base as well, because I think sourcing and understanding strains and where it's all coming from is you've done the heavy lifting for us. Thank you very much.
Of course. And I am such a data nerd and geek. Like, as we've gotten into this, my background was not in product related food.
Yeah. I've
been on the services side of healthcare for a very long time. And so a lot of this was drinking from a fire hose when we got in. But personally, I've been using superfoods and, for a long time. And actually, it was when COVID hit that I started supplementing with functional mushrooms every day. I attribute that to going a long way with keeping me healthy through that entire experience. Yeah, and mushrooms do fit within the category of adaptogens. So adaptogens are a broad term that really, there's three things that make an herb or a mushroom an adaptogen. One is that it's non-toxic, meaning you can consume it in any quantities and it will not harm or damage your health. You won't hit a toxic level at all. It's non-specific. And so what that means is that you don't take it, like, for example, if you're looking for, like, if you know you have a vitamin C deficiency and then you would take a vitamin C supplement, you're trying to cure for a specific function. Non-specific means adaptogens work with your body with where it's at in any given moment. And that is pure magic.
Yeah.
So a lot of ashwagandha, for an example.
Yeah.
A lot of people think ashwagandha really is just a calming agent and that it helps to bring, stress reduction and to relax you. It actually can have the opposite effect. So if you are too low, something like ashwagandha can bring you back into balance. If you're too, speedy or up high, it will help to calm and relax you. And that goes with all of the adaptogens, where wherever you're out of balance, it works to bring you back into center.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think two of the most studied ones, rhodiola, rosea, and ashwagandha, are the ones that you find a lot of research, which is really great. And it's wonderful to reiterate that about ashwagandha, because I think people are like, ashwagandha tea, I'll calm down. And I say the same thing with mood. And the studies that I've seen around those two specific adaptogens, what are so interesting about those studies is like when, of course, nobody wants to talk about this in big pharma, but that they'll put them to the test against anti-anxiety, antidepressants, and they'll really, in some cases, perform better in some trials and perform in many, many equally as well. Now, you may not be able to say that, but I've read the research, and that is what I see in those types of adaptogens. And so then I think we get to the world of the mycelial field, right? Where we have mushrooms and things, and there's such a rich connection, energetics. Again, you talk about prana and life force. It's really coming from Mother Nature.
Absolutely. And we are in the midst of a renaissance of returning, what I like to call returning back home, right? Return to the mother, return to nature, right? And all of these herbs, hundreds of years, thousands of years in China and other cultures, mushrooms have been used and other herbs have been used to heal naturally what in the United States a pill is prescribed for. Mm-hmm. And lastly, on the adaptogens, the third point I think this kind of goes into in the definition is it builds adaptive energy. And so what that means is that it actually accumulates benefit and multiplies over time. Mm. And it helps your body combat stressors, both internally and externally. And so some people talk about adaptogens like, well, I don't feel it, right? No, actually what it's doing is making you a more solid, stable human longer term. So when your environment is disrupted or your internal systems are disrupted, your body has the capability to remain in balance. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a shield or a body armor, right? Where it's actually going to protect you when something comes in, and it builds over time.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, everything. If you think about a lot of the other things that are in the world that people would take in response to a deficiency or something to heal or cure something, it's very explicit and direct and acute. And this is actually more of a holistic strengthening over time.
Yeah. And cool, because having them every day is sort of like supplementing your nutrition every day with these tools, with these adaptogenic herbs and mushrooms in the way that you're taking a daily dose, right? And that's like the beautiful part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And mushrooms, I mean, the fabulous world of fungi, I think there's over 38,000 strains.
Yeah.
And we have identified probably less than 20% of them, and like their uses, their benefits, and so it's fascinating. There's so many out there. And the two that we use, lion's mane and cordyceps, are two of my favorites. Mm-hmm. And they're becoming some of the more well-known, lion's mane, all for the brain, for focus and memory and cognition. And cordyceps is a daily thing for me too. It's like
nature's pre-workout. It's like
nature's pre-workout. And I mean, it is actually called like a natural Viagra as well. Like there is, with respect to stimulating.
Hello, pancakes for dinner, anyone?
With respect to stimulating blood flow.
Of course.
And opening up like the capillaries, it is very effective.
Yeah.
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 And athletes use it, for VO2 max and for exercise function and performance as well. Cordyceps is, it can be rocket fuel in a very natural way.
Yeah. And so how were they in the original recipe that Ryan had started with, those specific mushrooms, or did you test a lot of different ones to see what you really wanted to put in there? Because, I mean, also lion's mane is so beautiful when you see it. Like when you see it in its mushroom form, it's so beautiful. But
it's gorgeous. I love to cook with it too, by the way. Those mushrooms were in the recipe originally. And these are mushrooms that he and I both were using in our personal lives. For a while. He had a mold toxicity issue years ago, and it actually caused him to lose all of his hair. And
he was telling me the story. I was like, it's just like when we don't know what we don't know. And he's like, oh, there was like black mold on the wall, so I just washed it off. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's airborne.
It was everywhere, and he didn't realize it till he moved out. So he slept in that room with mold growing basically right behind his head every night, and so it created some really dire health issues, and like his mental health was really out of whack. And so part of him rebuilding his mental fortitude and capacity was using lion's mane. And he's always been a big guy working out, and so cordyceps has been a big part of his physical exercise regimen as well. So. And maca for us both. I mean, I love maca. I take maca every day, whether or not I'm eating Prana Cakes. But to me, it's like, I mean, there's so many superfoods that come out of South America that people are starting to learn more about. I think maca is becoming more mainstream at this point.
For sure. I was just like, someone was telling me it's like magnesium. There's 23 different kinds, and each one has a little bit, this is what happens when you're rewilding your life, right? There's so many different strains of plant life out there, so it's trying them all. I've definitely had maca I hate to call it cheap and cheerful, but I'm like a maca scoop powder, something that I'm putting into a protein smoothie and I'm like, it's making me sweaty and I don't know. And I'm not really paying attention to where it's coming from. It might have been cut with stuff, just when you go to GNC, it's probably not the vibe. And then like now I have found maca that's like hormonal balancing and like, the other things that I was nervous to take, but they're just totally different strain, different sourcing.
Yeah. And sourcing ingredients is, as having a food company and putting products into the world, something that people are deciding to put into their bodies every single day. There's another layer of responsibility as an entrepreneur that Ryan and I carry. I do the supply sourcing for us and the ingredient work and a lot of the research. So all things from country of origin, understanding the lab analysis and yeast and mold counts and the quality of the ingredients, something like a beta glucans in mushrooms, which is the percentage of the active compounds that actually can be utilized. And so doing the research and understanding something like mushrooms where, if they're coming from China or are they coming from Canada or the US, and China actually supplies probably about 75 to 80% of the world's mushrooms. And then if they're coming from there, do you know your sources? Are they grown in soil? Are they grown in the lab? And understanding at the end of the day, so many issues with our food comes from the environment with which they're grown. If the soil is toxic and poisoned, that's going to get into the food and ultimately work its all the way down the chain into when it's on your plate. And so that's a lot of it is like at first when we started, we said, we're not going to buy anything from China. And that was a decision that Ryan and I made. And we've gotten more educated over time to realize that there are some high quality operations where you can find food that you feel really good about. So there are a couple of herbs that we bring over. Our mushrooms originate in China. They're lab grown. And spirulina is another one. Spirulina is an algae. And so it sucks up everything around it from the environment. And so you need to be really clear about where it's coming from. And that's one, too, that has such a spec. There's so many spirulina products out in the market. And it's something that can be, I wouldn't say it can be toxic, but it can be holding higher content of heavy metals, or it could be less effective. Not all spirulina, not all superfoods are created equally. So sourcing and country of origin is very important.
Yeah.
And everything we buy is organic.
Everything you see in the grocery store, right? From an apple to whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is the food world we live in now. This is why I can eat a croissant in France, but I can't eat one here anymore or whatever, because there's just the food supply chain continues to change and change and change. So staying on top of that must be a task and a half.
It is. And, one of the things that I love about being a food entrepreneur is taking a stand for everything that's wrong about our food system. And this is a very deep subject that has a lot of tendrils that connect to a lot of different areas of our economy. But Ryan and I were taking a stand as these emerging brands, these healthier for you brands that are doing things right, and we're buying the right ingredients. We're still collectively probably 10% of the packaged food that's consumed in the US every year. It's growing.
Yeah.
Big food is still a big issue.
For sure. But like, I think of brands like Primal Kitchen, like kicking the doors open to be like, okay, how can we Mark Sisson build something? It grows. And that's very much the place that I think we're starting to live in, or I'm hoping that we're starting to live in, which is that the demand of the people who want to eat healthier food in this way is outweighing the like costing or the things that are going in. And these, let's maybe say higher end grocery stores, because it's certainly not every grocery store, but grocery stores more and more and more, they're like, well, we have so much demand. The buyer's going to start to take this stuff in. Right. And that's a cascade effect that I think we really want to continue to let rise, because it's so we're at Grit and Grace Ranch. You beautifully came to visit so we could record in person. And I'm having a little retreat here for the Sherpa Breath and Cold mentorship group. And one thing that this brings to mind in this part of the conversation that's relevant is catering. Like every time I cater any of my retreats, I'm making sure that it's like ancestral, or that it's at least organic and local. But like, we do a lot of ancestral stuff we bring in, and the caterers always come to me, this specific one in Texas I've worked with before, and say, okay, here's what I can do for your budget. And I always say, hey, I need it to be organic. I need to go find the meat has to come from the local farms. 2 years ago when I had a retreat, I was talking about the food, and then I was like, I'm sure I'll cry at the retreat at some point. And it turned out that I like cried when I was telling the story about how I drove, because I was like just trying to save some budget dollars. So I drove to the farm and picked up all the ribs and stuff. And I was like telling a story about how I was so honored to be able to eat this cattle that was raised not too far from Austin. And I was like, started crying in the retreat. And I was like, I thought I was going to cry in the retreat about 100 things, but it wasn't about the cows. I didn't know. It was so, but it felt really good. And the caterer said to me at the end of that retreat, and this one she knew just going in, she's like, I go back so many times to people to give them the organic, local, grass-fed, sustainable, ancestral, whatever it is menu. And the budget, sometimes it doubles.
Yep.
And then very quickly, many corporations or companies, whatever, are like, okay, let's just go back to the original budget because they don't account for it. And she said to me when I worked with her 3 years ago for the first time, she said, you're the first person who's come back to me and agreed to the menu, which I felt so
good for you.
effing proud of.
I love that. And
also you white knuckle it as a business owner a little because you cost your retreat, you set your things up and you're like, okay, I'm going to spend double what I thought. And we're worth it. And the energy, and we just came off of Dave's event and certainly they're dictating to the hotel, like you're making this steak, it's grass fed with the butter. We had lamb chops. But like he certainly spent money on food because he's like, I want all of us to feel good all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's so imperative.
Food is the OG biohack, right? I mean, like, that's period, end of statement. What we put into our bodies has a direct correlation to how we're going to feel. It has a direct correlation into the body's ability to fight and ward off disease. That is something that's so overlooked by people. A lot of people, even if they're in the healthy space, and like, well, I work out, I think about protein and I think about macros, but they're not thinking about the quality of the food, right? And thinking, oh, so long as I'm getting enough protein, I'm good. And that's a common conversation that I have too. And starting to say, we got to scratch a layer deeper. You have to understand where your food's coming from, and things like grass-fed, grass-finished beef, right? Or eggs, for an example, where you know that whether it comes to hormones or the humanity of the cows or the chickens, right, and how they're treated and they're raised, and like not to go totally down this rabbit hole, but there's a consciousness associated with anything we consume. And a lot of people don't really connect this, but anytime, let's say if you make the decision to eat bacon or a pork product, and it is, not to be controversial for those who love pork, but it tends to be one of the more lower vibrational animals because of how they're treated, how they're raised, and their living conditions. And then we then would consume and take on that energy. And so a lot of people overlook that. And when it comes to any of the animal products or anything else that we're consciously, it's what kind of life do they live? How ultimately were they prepared for being sustenance for you? And that's something that's really important. I firmly believe in.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is you're absolutely right. I don't think we talk about it enough, that energetic transfer. And just really feeling into, this is like when we have, just like when you have Living Prana, Prana Cakes, brain cakes. In the beginning, I was like, I'm only going to have brain cakes at night. I'm going to have Prana Cakes in the morning. And then it's like, when you run out of one, you're like, well, I don't care. I'm not having this one at night now. I'm not going to not have this. But really just like looking at and understanding the ingredients, and also feeling like high vibe food, what does it do for you?
Yeah.
Right. And like, I know this from being, again, in the retreat space where people will eat. And when we did Ancestral Food, and this is, I think, an important point to talk about with you specifically, because I'm sure that you get this feedback that everyone's on a different budget in the world, right? There's a reason the 99-cent menu actually just thrives, because people are navigating finances, and that is something for us all to consider. But I will say that at the retreat that we've done, Ancestral Food, and there's like, everyone's having a plate of dinner. It is a good portion. It's not like an over serving, piled to the sky. Everyone's having a very healthy portion. And the number one thing people said about that food when they ate it, and I think this is correlated to how you are all making food, is that I ate the food, I cleaned my plate, it felt really good, and I really wasn't hungry until like the next meal or dinner, because it was like the food was so well prepared, and the animals you're eating are cared for, and it gave you sustenance instead of giving you the thing, like, what do they say this about Chinese food? You eat and you're hungry an hour later or something. I don't know if that's like real, but it's like that's game changing, right? And I think this is something that is important to just address, which is if I go and I try to get Bisquick off the shelf or some shitty made thing, no offense, whatever, Bisquick, or I'm going to come and sit down with some Living Prana and have some of your cakes, then it's a whole different thing.
It's a whole different thing. And this goes into the quality of the food, the quality of the ingredients. Like for us, buckwheat, it's a complete protein. So it has all the essential amino acids. It's high in fiber. It's so big supporting landing place for when you put food into your body. Fiber is critical for that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when people talk about refined versus whole carbs, and it's been things that have been stripped of their vitamins, their minerals, the fiber. And fiber is that conduit that carries the nutrition from once it enters your body all the way down, like that gut brain access and getting into the gut microbiome, piercing that layer. Without fiber, none of that happens.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of like these products that are out there, the cheaper products, these refined carbs that makes up the majority of what's out there in the grocery store have been stripped of its core nutrition. And why has it been stripped? Now, I mean, that's a whole nother deep dive, right? Of like
corn farmers or
the conversation of like, well, why take the nutrition out of nutrition? So there are other things at play.
Yeah.
And I know like we could do probably 3 episodes on that.
For sure.
And
it is a rabbit hole, but it is like, we're taking the nutrition, we're making things cheaper, we're bulking people, like people feel full, but they don't feel healthy. It's a whole confusing spiral.
It's food for thought and asking the question. And then the other thing too, when people think of it as going back to cost, and where if you look at inflation and everything that's happened and changed in the world since COVID hit, and there's been a story here, every couple of months it's a different story. It's shipping because of COVID. It's this, it's that, it's supply chain. We hear all these stories from corporations about why their costs are going up. And the message from them has been, we're only raising prices to stay consistent with our cost increases. Now, there's actually been some deep diving to show that's not true. And and because a lot of these food companies are public and you can kind of deep dive into their financials and understand what's going on. But some of the largest food businesses, mostly the manufacturers of packaged food, not necessarily the grocery chains, they've been seeing almost record profit growth. And if you're seeing that kind of profit growth, that means that those price increases you're passing through are far beyond your cost increases.
Yeah.
So the messaging is incongruent with what's really happening. And they're just hoping the world doesn't really see that. But even like the cost of milk and the cost of eggs and those things, I don't know the exact number, but at least have gone up 50% over the last 12 to 18 months. Gallon of milk, a dozen of eggs, things that were always staples and so easy. You could keep them and you knew you could feed your family in a relatively healthy way. And this is one of the biggest pain points in America now. And since we've launched, we have a premium product, but we have not raised our prices in the a little over 2 years since we launched. And at $18.99 on these pancake mixes, and if you get 6 meals out of them, plus your toppings, it's under $5 a plate. You're lucky to go get a $5 value meal that just got reinstated at these fast food places, which is a fraction of the nutrition.
Yeah.
So we do work on explaining and sharing that with people, because if you look at and you compare this to a Birch Benders or a Bisquick, you're going to say, why is Birch Benders $5.99 or $6.99 and your product is $18.99?
Yeah.
Right? Why is it nearly triple the cost? And you can see it's because you're putting high quality real food into your body, and it's still a value play compared to other options of how you could feed your family.
Yeah, for the nourishment.
100%.
And I also want to just share, because we haven't really spoken to this piece of the usage occasion of the beautiful, whether it's pancakes or waffles, that's great, which sometimes for me, if I'm telling the truth, is I know that I'm getting nourishment and I'm like, this is amazing. And this will be my grade B dark maple syrup delivery vehicle. And so that's great. And also I recognize that is giving myself some, I don't really have a big problem with maple. I put maple syrup in things before anything else. But the thing that I really loved in kind of getting to know you in this product a bit is that it's, if you make the batter a little thinner and you make it thin, it's sort of like a crepe, and you can wrap something in it or put do your egg wrap in it. So it's taken the place of, especially in the early days when I'm like, is it a coconut wrap or is it a cassava wrap? Which, by the way, the cassava wraps jack my blood sugar. I wear a CGM sometimes and I'm like, I can't do cassava. And so there's so much cassava and just cassava flour or cassava wraps, obviously.
Yep.
And so it's like, how do I find the thing that's going to be a good blend of a good blend of nutrients that's also not going to spike my blood sugar, that I can use to do for my wraps, that I can use to do for everything else. And then it's like always in a bag in your cabinet. And if you buy multiples, it's less expensive.
Absolutely. We offer the 3-packs for that. When you know, the proof is in the Prana, so go buy yourself a 3-pack. But cassava, right? So why does it jack up your blood sugar, right? And why does it's lacking fiber. I refer to cassava, and I do eat some cassava, but I refer to cassava as it's in the bucket of empty carbs. And
it's sort of like a dirty root, isn't it? In some way, I don't mean dirty like the bottom feeder. I just mean like it's it's in so much more brands that we don't even need to mention per se, but it's in so much more. We're not doing corn tortilla anymore. Like if I'm going to go, I'm going to have some kind of tortilla chip, I'm going to have corn over cassava because corn actually does a better job of not riding high in my blood sugar. Like it's not spiking me versus cassava. Now that's not for everyone, but I see it a lot with clients. And there's more and more things that are like, well, we'll be grain free, but then we're going to give you this thing, like you said, that's just like a staunch carbohydrate that's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. Right. And so there is a progression, right, of the steps of where things are getting better. And like if you look at corn, for example, and if you can truly find organic, non-GMO corn, there's absolutely no issue. The challenge is some 85, 90, maybe even higher % of corn is GMO in our country, in the US.
Yeah.
Right. And if you can find local organic corn, that's not the case. It's wonderful. Or masa is a derivative there. So that's great. And then cassava, it's a lot of it's marketing. It's one of my biggest qualms with the packaged food business, and that there's no accountability to the messaging that is, or there's little accountability. I can't say no accountability. There's little accountability to the messaging that companies use that can be misleading, deceptive, or incomplete to make customers feel that something is way healthier than it is. And things like...
We see this in veganism all the time, where like you read the package and the first ingredient's like sugar, 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 or you eat the thing and you're like, cool, it's vegan, but it's made, what else is it made from besides sugar? It's like so sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big challenge. Sugar alcohols, no added sugar, like that deception where like there are a lot of products out there that will say no added sugar. That's technically a correct definition if you're using a sugar alcohol or like a monk fruit or an erythritol or a stevia. Those things don't fall into the definition of added sugar. A lot of people don't realize the distinction. So something can be jacked loaded with a monk fruit, a stevia, or even an erythritol, but it would show 0 added sugar on the nutritional panel. Someone's like, oh, cool. It's like there's no added sugar. But that does not mean that it's good for you.
Yeah.
And so, and there are other examples like that, we have been, transparency is very important to Ryan and me in what we do, in our messaging, and what's on our packaging, and how we show up, and that the products need to deliver the experience and the taste that we say it will. And what we say is what you're going to get, and it's very clear there's congruency between messaging and product experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And packaging and all of it. Because it's like, it's coming from CPG in my dark past. That's so much of the marketing. It's like when Tito's launched they're like, vodka, it's gluten-free. And I was like, 99% of vodka is gluten-free. You're just going to go on the train of gluten-free. And that's what sold so much, I think, of Tito's. It's like, we want to be on the menu as gluten-free. It's like, cool. So is my shampoo. And I'm not trying to eat my shampoo.
No, I do laugh that there are some canned beverages out there, and that the whole segment of healthy or functional beverages has gotten so wild, and it looks like a carnival when you walk into some of the grocery stores now. But, a lot of them say gluten-free on them. And I'm like,
do we need?
What?
It's just on
Why?
trend. On trend.
And there's nothing in this world where you're having a sparkling water product that would be glutinous. So why? Yeah. Anyways, so there's a lot of that out there where I think that there is a lot of, there could be much better accountability with respect to how food companies hold the consumer on the education journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm so appreciative, not just because I have pancakes in my cabinet all the time, but I'm appreciative that you guys are doing that work, because here's the thing, busy moms and dads or whoever, right? Any one of us who want to get better nourishment and have it easy to handle and just make a meal and move on. We love you because we don't want to do the work of doing all the research and diving into all the ingredients and understanding, and just also knowing that these products are things that we can have every day, and that you have, tried and tested this for years yourself, and all of Ryan's friends makes us feel better.
Yeah. We've gotten some wonderful feedback over time, which continues to really be one of our North Stars and really drives us. And the more that we get into it and we test and we play with these products, we're on this big campaign of using it as a bread replacement. So hashtag break up with bread. It's a movement. And so think about like avocado toast is now avocado cake. I make waffles often. I'll do over easy eggs and make almost like an egg sandwich.
Yeah.
So you can do them savory, you can do them sweet, you can thin them out, make them crepe or wrap like, where you can do it with turkey and avocado or whatever you would make a sandwich or a wrap with. and use the pancakes instead.
Yeah.
And you're getting real nutrition and real complex carbs in your experience versus the empty carbs that are in most bread products at this point in time.
I'm going to leave Brian's address in the show notes so that all of you can go over and knock on his door while he's cooking and just get fed over and over. Every time you tell me about something you're making with this, I'm like, fuck, I got to try that myself.
Waffle Wednesdays, it's a thing in my kitchen.
Listen.
So if you're in the LA area,
don't tempt me to move back to Los Angeles.
yeah. If you're in the LA area, we do Waffle Wednesdays. So shoot us a DM, and we'll find a way to make some magic together.
Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah.
Silver Biotics. Everyone on this podcast, if you're listening to this podcast for the last few years, you know that I love Silver Biotics toothpaste. The green one, it's amazing. It is my absolute favorite toothpaste on the planet. It is whole body healthy. There's no toxic ingredients. When you look up, this is what I don't love. When you look up all these things online, mouthwash and toothpaste and lozenges and immune support things, and even many facial serums, there's a lot of toxic ingredients across the board in these big name brands. And so why I love Silver Biotics and their entire product line, especially right now, is for their immune support tools. So I have a lot of dental work coming up, some dental surgery. I'm not great at a dentist. Many of us aren't. But not just using the toothpaste, but really bolstering my oral health by utilizing several things that they have. And we're rolling into flu season, as you may feel already. It's coming in hot or cold, as it were. So using the immune support supplement from Silver Biotics, which you swish around in your mouth for about 30 seconds, it bolsters the health of my gums and my teeth. And then you swallow it. Unlike those nasty toxic mouthwashes on the market that ruin your nitric oxide production and all those things, the immune support supplement is beautiful. There's a 30 ppm. That's the one that I use, swish in my mouth, and just keeping my gums and teeth intact while I'm going through all these procedures, as well as the immune support supplement that is a nasal spray, just bolstering up carry it every time I go on a plane, bolstering my health and keeping me going strong. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is this wound dressing gel. They call it the Silver Biotics Silver Gel. So Silver Soul technology is in that. And I'm using that off-label many times. Yes, I'm using it for cuts and scrapes and bruises and things like that, but I use it for razor burn. It is like nothing I have ever used, ladies and gentlemen. And when I'm at the gym a lot and in the sauna a lot, I'm getting a little bit of this like acne around the forehead, hairline, chin, etc. Like even though I'm washing my face all the time, just a little bit of that acne is coming from the sweat. And so after I clean myself up, I put on a little bit of this silver gel, and it is like nothing else you can even imagine. So I want you to check out Silver Biotics, silverbiotics.com, silverbiotics.com. You use the code WellPower, you get 30% off. It's like gifting season. They have travel size, large sizes. It's all there for you. Check it out. Get as excited as me about Silver Biotics. I want to shine a little bit of a light on you. I like to ask a couple questions as I begin to wrap up the episodes. And I really want you to talk a little bit about some of your favorite biohacks. Like are there specific things you're using outside of the wheelhouse of nutrition and your brand that you're like, damn, this is the thing right now for me? I love rectal ozone.
Anything rectal. Let's go. So ozone. Ozone has been huge, and it hasn't been through insufflation. I actually have somebody who puts a needle in my neck, and I take it through the vein, and because it's closest to the heart. That's fairly regular for me. I do it for maintenance, but anytime I'm dealing with any kind of cold, or I had a fungus issue a couple of months ago, bacteria issue, that cleared that up in 2 treatments. It was really incredible. So
are they like pulling like major autohemotherapy? Like they're pulling out blood and circulating it back in the vein, or they're just ozone into you?
No, ozone into me.
You better get a good professional.
Yeah.
Because the FDA might just shut down this podcast while we talked about it. But it's amazing. I've used ozone in many ways, and I feel like it is an amazing hack.
Yeah. Someone who, he's a naturopath, former ENT. So but still, I know it's not something that's commercially readily available. So it's not, I can't sit here and say, offer this as guidance for someone who can go pick this up. But that's been great in times where I've needed it. But something that actually is commercially available, PEMF. PEMF is my favorite cellular recharge. And so anytime that I've had tight hips or body pain or low energy, anything that's been going on symptomatic energetically with my cells, my muscles, my body, I will apply PEMF, whether that's like with a mat or with a bed. And in the span of 15 to 20 minutes, I feel like a new human.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Do you have a device at home, or do you go to different places?
I go to different places at this point in time.
Because they're fancy. The devices can be fancy. There's home units too, but
there's home units, but the really to get the real benefit, because for me, anything in my life, if I'm doing something, I want to do it as deeply and thoroughly as I possibly can. Mm-hmm. So when I go in, I go to the most, like I'll lay on the PEMF bed, crank it all the way up, right? And I'm literally convulsing on the bed as the voltage is shooting through me. And it's amazing. It can be a little painful in the moment, but then the next day and the afternoon after, it's incredible. There are a lot of centers that have been opening up around the country that offer it. And you can go in for maybe anywhere between $40 to $60 for a 30-minute session. So it's accessible. You just need to do some research.
And you don't have to jack it up to 90 like Brian likes. You can just do it softly and gently to yourself, especially if you have a challenging injury or something.
Yeah, you can do that. And you're especially cold exposure has been amazing. I do, and when I can't get into a cold plunge, I actually will dunk my face into a massive bowl of cold water and ice in the morning for like 30-second increments. Mm-hmm. And that will start your day and start like the way that it just, the alertness, the brightness, and like everything just is so much brighter and crisper when I do that in the morning. Yeah.
I love that kind of emotional cascade that happens, because sometimes I'll wake up and be like, oh, it's kind of a day today, or the schedule or whatever. And then, face in the ice or cold shower. Although the water's not as cold in Texas as I'd like it to be coming out of the shower head. But yeah, the cold plunge, I mean, that's a winner for me.
That's a win. Red light. I think I've worked with a couple of different products. To me, it's understanding the wavelength that's included in the bulbs, but then effectively like using it regularly. And I actually do two things. So one, I have a panel that's next to my altar when I meditate in the morning. So every morning when I sit down for meditation, I'm turning the red light panel on. Mm-hmm. And so I'll get, I'd set the clock for, 20 minutes or so. I don't want to overextend it, but I have that running and habit stacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
it's so nice with meditation too, because sometimes there's moments where, although I've been so good tonight, I have a meditation to finish my hour, but I've been doing an hour a day now for it's just a little over 2 weeks. Before that, it was like much shorter, 15, 20 minute practice. Wow. But the hour makes a difference, but it's really nice to stack things, right? Stack some frequency music, add some red light. So I really agree with that, because then you feel like I'm doing lots of things at once versus sitting still only, know? Yeah. Kind of helps ease the mind in that direction.
Yeah, it's helpful. Like if you're sitting there, why not do multiple things that you're going to get a benefit from? And my whole life, I've been very much of like an optimizer. Yeah. Like, how am I going to do things more efficiently? And like, I originally, it was like multitasking. And then I realized that's not totally the most healthy expression of optimizing, because you may not be fully present for what you need to be. But habit stacking is great. Yeah. Where you're like, things can be running around you while you're doing a certain thing. And that's really effective with the day. Or I'm currently using a red light hat. And so that to like stimulate hair growth.
Baseball hat looking?
Correct. Yeah. Cool. Baseball hat. I use that for 30 minutes a day as well, on top of a copper peptide as well.
Nice.
So yes, while my hair is long, I've had some like thinning and some hair loss that happened. It seemed acute. There was something going on. It might have been a transition when I left Maui to LA and really getting situated to a very different level of energy after living on an island for almost 3 years. But I'd noticed I was having some clumping and my hair was coming out in the shower. And so that's when I did some research, and those two things between the red light and the copper peptide have been now becoming a practice. And I've seen a difference, where my hair is growing back thicker.
Yeah. And I've heard that too from many people. Yeah. And I have my little, I don't know if you saw when we were driving home in the Jeep the other night, we all just went to a conference together, and driving home in the little purple Jeep, that I keep the little red light square and next to the e-brake. It fits right there. Yep. And then I just I can get some extra FaceTime, or if I'm headed to the gym in the morning and I haven't had a chance to do the panel. This is a little Huberman research, but he talks about the red light therapy, open in your eyes 90 seconds or something. And you look at the light on the lower lids just to give yourself a little, because I'm noticing my vision shifting a bit. So I've been doing that in the car when I'm on the way to the gym.
Oh, great.
And I try to do it at the red lights, because when you're driving in the morning, it's not fully light yet. People are like, what's going on in that Jeep? What's going on in that Jeep? It's like disco lights, Yeah. It's so funny.
Yeah, and I had originally thought that exposure of red light into the eyes could be very damaging.
Yeah.
And I've actually
there's still
heard a lot of things
about it.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things to the contrary, enough to invite a conversation of where, anything in moderation is probably fine.
Yeah.
But I think that's great.
Yeah. Here's my wacky eye stack, and it's working to an extent. The problem with biohacking is when you put too many things in, you're like, which one's working the most? But so my eye stack, I have a good supplement that's called Vision Support. That's Nordic Naturals that I really like.
They're a great brand.
I stack that with Quicksilver. None of these are like advertising partners or whatever. Quicksilver Scientific makes a membrane mend. It doesn't taste very good, but you hold it in your mouth, and like that's a big reco from them. So that I'm just about 2 or 3 weeks in on that. NAD sublinguals from NAD Plus. So I put 2 of those under my tongue. And when I'm doing that plus red light, if there's a straight 2 weeks that's going on and I'm home and I'm not traveling, I really notice a difference. The challenge now is like, which one can I take? Do I take one out? Because I'm trying to make a budget, make a manageable budget of all the things you put together.
Yep.
But yeah, I've just hit that age where my eyes have gotten a little wonky and I'm like, okay, let's fix this up right away. So we'll see. If I'm blind in a year, you'll know the red light therapy is not a good idea. Okay. That's when you'll know.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I like to close with, I always like to ask, I asked every guest if they could go back to their 10-year-old self, 10 or 11-year-old self, and give some advice until the day that I interviewed Dave Asprey. And he said, well, at 10 or 11, your prefrontal cortex, and this is not fully developed, and you're not going to really remember to give the advice. Like, why wouldn't you give it to yourself at like 15 or 18? And so without being so worried about the age range, I would love for you, the Brian Murphy that you are sitting here now, as wise adult, if you were going to go back to your younger self and give them one piece of advice and say, hey, young Brian, here's your well power. Here's your piece of advice that's just going to change the trajectory or really bolster what you're doing in the world or how you dream big. What would that advice be?
Yeah, it's simple. Love yourself first and know your worth from just a humble, confident standpoint. And I think that goes a long way for people as they're developing. Yeah, that would be it.
Yeah, it's amazing. That really lands with me at this moment in my life, as you know.
I do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sitting with me.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Here in Austin, Texas. I love you and your pancakes.
I love you, yes.
And more to come. Want to tell everybody where they can find all your goodies and where they can find you on social and on the webs?
Absolutely. So the company Living Prana. We are living_prana on Instagram, on most socials, except for Facebook. It's Living Prana Co. You can find us on Amazon when you're shopping. That's where you can get your best deals when you get your 3-packs. Our website is livingprana.co. It's not .com. Only the cool kids are doing .co these days. And personally, my Instagram is at bmurphy22a. But yeah, that's where you can find us. And if you follow us on Instagram, we do a lot of cool video content about where we're popping up and promoting. And if you're in the Southern California area ever, we do a lot of different events to get back into various communities. So you can find us and information through that. We post recipes and all the things when I'm playing in my kitchen and creating Waffle Wednesdays. Like, we do our best to show the world how proud we are of these babies and the impact they're making.
Yeah, amazing. So get your hotcakes, people, and then get to the stores and tell every single grocery store manager that you know that you're ready to put Living Prana on your shelf.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful.
Yes, thank you for joining us here on Well Power. You can submit questions, learn more, shop incredible brands, and connect with me at wellpower.life or follow me on social at biohacking.breath.cold. From comfort to courage, friends, we're doing it. Any foul language you hear is not approved by my mother.